It is a wonderful pleasure and privilege to have on our phones right now a man who may be the leading journalist in the state of Israel, whose best-selling book, My Promised Land, has taken America by storm. And everybody I speak with, Ari, I want you to know I can't go anywhere where people have not read your book, are reading your book, think your book is wonderful. And kol hakavod, you did a fabulous job, and it's so lovely of you to give me a few minutes on Shalom TV. Thank you and welcome.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you, Mark.
Thank you. By the way, I asked you off camera. I want you to answer again. Where are you physically now, Ari, as we speak?
Right now, my home, just north of Tel Aviv, in one of the many spots throughout the country where the sirens were howling today as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent most of the day down by the Gaza border with our soldiers.
Okay. Well, again, kol hakavod to you. And again, we hope that you and all Israel stay safe. I'm calling you specifically because you published a piece in Haaretz where you write, and I don't know whether you gave it the title, Ari, or whether somebody else did, or whether an editor did. The title of the story is, "In this sad war story, Israel is in the right." By the way, is that your title, or did somebody give the title to that story?
This is the English version done by an editor, but it reflects very much where I stand. You know,
okay.
The headline in Hebrew is actually even more blunt.
Okay.
So basically, it says, we are right.
Okay. I'm just going to quote just a little bit that is, again, circulating on the website by the Conference of Presidents and others, where you basically are calling Hamas, and I want to make sure everybody understands that what Ari Shavit is referring to are Hamas Palestinians. You say Hamas is basically neo-Nazi, that they are war criminals, and that by no means can we show any empathy for the evil they represent. I believe, Ari, that there will be some people who are surprised that you would take such an extreme stance. I want you to explain to us why.
First of all, I do not think it's an extreme stand. Let me be accurate. So let me put things, the way I wrote them and the way I feel about them.
Please.
What you said is accurate, but people might not get exactly the right idea. So let's first of all make the distinction, which is very important, between the Palestinian people in general and the Palestinian population of Gaza at the moment, for which I have empathy, and I'm really sorry and in pain over the suffering they are going to, and Hamas. Mm-hmm. And what I say in my article, which I think is elementary, but sadly some elementary things are not being said these days, is that we have to remember that Hamas is a fascist organization. It oppresses women, it oppresses Christians, it oppresses gays, it oppresses individuals. Before even we get into the fight with Israel and the Jews, this is a fascist organization. And therefore I think that liberals throughout the world, in America, in Europe, in Israel, should always bear this in mind and be very cautious not to have any sympathy to this evil fascist organization. Number two, why is Israel so right in this struggle? Because in the case of the Gaza Strip, we did exactly what the international community expected us to do. Mm-hmm. We did what peaceniks, again, in America, in Europe, and in Israel, including myself, have demanded of my government to do, which is we pulled out of the Gaza Strip, we dismantled the settlements, we actually went through the pain of removing over 8,000 people from their homes, no checkpoints there, no settlers, no occupying army. What did Hamas do? It did not take the first semi-liberated Palestinian piece of land ever. It's the first time in Palestinian history that a piece of land that is generally theirs with some restrictions. They did not try to make it into a Palestinian Singapore. They did not try to give future hope and life to their people. They turned it into a fanatical entity, again, a dictatorship, a tyranny that provokes Israel. Point number three, over 9 years since we withdrew from Gaza, they've increased their shooting into Israel for no reason, with no justification whatsoever. This became even worse in the last few weeks when Israel's government, and I'm not a great fan of this Israeli government. I'm not a Likudnik, I'm not a Netanyahu fan. But this government, this right-wing Israeli government, has shown such amazing restraint. It really did not want to go into this military operation. Time after time after time after time, it was provoked, but it showed restraint. And I really salute our government and our prime minister for doing that. But Hamas would not let go. Although we almost begged them to stop this escalation, they kept on, and therefore this campaign is a result of a really unprovoked attack on Israel. There should be no doubts about it. But the fourth point, which is perhaps as important as others and perhaps even more important, is that one has to understand that Hamas, I'm a realist, and I see things, in a universal way. While being a proud Jew and a committed Israeli, I do look at things also from the side in a kind of universal way. There are wars in the world. There are brutal wars. Terrible things happen in war. But what we see here is a unique phenomenon because Hamas's tragedy is based on two goals. One is to kill Israeli civilians, which is atrocious. But the other, that is in many ways even more eerie, is that actually Hamas's real strategy is based on the attempt to have Palestinian civilians killed. Their entire strategy is based, it's not, my government and speakers for the government keep talking, rightly so, about the fact that Hamas is using Palestinian population as human shield. I go further. I think it's much more dramatic than that. It's not that they use them as human shield. Their actual aim is to have dozens, and if they can help it, hundreds of Palestinians killed by Israelis. That's the real war game that they are playing. And this is different than almost any other reasonable force in the world that is engaged in war. So because of these 3, 4, 5 reasons, because Hamas is a fascist organization, because we did pull out of Gaza, no occupation, no settlements, because they kept provoking us and our government was restrained, and because the way they handle warfare is so evil, again, not only regarding my people, my family, my neighbors, Israeli civilians, but regarding their own Palestinian population. Because of all that, Hamas is clearly the guilty, and I would say the evil party here. And therefore, Israel is in total right in trying to defend itself against this evil power. And again, one has, and I've stated in my article, one can argue of whether we should have boots on the ground or not, or whether we should take this step or not, whether we can be more cautious in the way we use our force or not. All these are legitimate issues, and they should be discussed. But one should not lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is clear. We are faced here with an evil force that launched an evil attack on our democracy, and we have the right and the duty to defend ourselves.
Ari, that's an amazing statement. When people talk about you in general, one of the things that they're impressed with is your ability to try to explain in both clear and simple terms the complexity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not the right word. It's this attempt to, in some way, deal with one piece of land that both Jew and Arab has enormous feelings for, and feelings that it belongs to them. And in your book and in your writing and when you speak, and I've heard you speak many times, as you know, you're trying to help your listener, whoever the listener is, especially young people, especially college-age kids, understand the complexity, and you try to show both sides. In this instance, it sounds as if for you, in a very uncharacteristic way, and you tell me if I'm going too far, Ari, for you it's black and white. In this instance, is it black and white for Ari Shavit?
Well, again, it's important for me. It is in one way, but it is important for me to make the distinction. So in a day like today, when 15 people died in this school, this UNRWA school, and in these days, when hundreds of Palestinians get killed, among them women and children, I feel for them. I cannot turn my eyes away from that. My heart goes out to the victims of this horrible violence, of this horrible tragedy. And my empathy is, I have deep empathy to the Palestinian people. But I make a very clear distinction. The Palestinians themselves are the victims of this evil regime. So when it comes to the conflict between the Israeli democracy and this fascist religious organization called Hamas, it is black and white. Now, I'll tell you why it's even more black and white. Because beyond, Hamas is relatively small, it's vicious, but it's a small organization. We are facing here the challenge of discovering that even this small organization is pretty sophisticated and it's challenging us in a serious way. But there is a much larger issue at hand because the Middle East is becoming chaotic. The old dangers Israel faced, which is the Syrian army, the great Syrian army, the great Iraqi army, and other modern, well-armed Arab armies, is very much, it's not gone, but it's suspended for years, perhaps for decades. Because there is no Syrian army as it was, there is no Iraqi army, and as I like to say, the Egyptian army is too preoccupied with oppressing its own people. So, in this context, the new threat to Israel, which is the new threat to Arab humanists and free Arab people and people who want a life for Arabs throughout the Middle East, is this Arab chaos. The fact that we have so many dangerous new organizations, new and old, that are not states, but are sub-state organizations, like ISIS in Iraq, like the Islamic Jihad, like the World Jihad, like the Al-Qaeda forces, like Hezbollah, and like Hamas. This is the new threat, first of all, for Israel, but also for moderate, reasonable, life-loving Arabs throughout the region. If we are not firm regarding these forces, if our democracy does not show that it can deal with them, we'll have total instability in the region, and all decent people will be threatened. Israelis and Arabs and Palestinians, and moderate Palestinians. So it is very important, again, while having empathy to the Palestinian individual, and to the Palestinian victim, and to a woman or a child that, God forbid, was killed or wounded, that we should always have mercy, empathy to these people. But that's very different from these evil organizations with which we should be very firm and we should be tough in dealing with that, because not only for the sake of the Jewish people, which is important enough, but also for the sake of democracy, of humanism, and with the hope of having some sort of hope for the reasonable people of the Middle East.
Boy, I hope everybody's hearing you. You say it so beautifully. I do want to give you a chance to make sure people don't misunderstand you, Ari. You know, some people are going to say, well, Ari Shavit is sounding like people on the right. I mean, this could be a position taken by Americans for a safe Israel. And the question they would ask you is, are all the distinctions you make, where does, in your mind, the Palestinian Authority and Fatah, which has now made an agreement with Hamas, where do they stand in the picture as you see it? On the right, the feeling is that everything you're saying is right, but it extends to the Palestinian Authority as well. What do you say to them?
I'll say something about the Palestinian Authority, but there is really a larger issue here, and this is why I think my position is totally consistent with my wish of having a two-state solution and eventually having peace.
Okay.
So, and this is the following. Any notion of peace, all the peace plans and all peace concepts were based on the idea of Palestinian demilitarization. The only way to convince Israelis to take the risks involved in retreating from parts of the West Bank in the future in order to enable a free and democratic Palestine to evolve, to emerge, which I really hope will happen. The only way to do it is to convince Israelis that once we withdraw, the area we will withdraw from is really demilitarized and is not used in the way that Hamas is using it. So what I'm saying is not only for the sake of the Jewish people to which I belong, I proudly belong, and it's not only for the sake of the Jewish state in which I proudly believe, it's really for the sake of peace. The only way to have, I do not believe that final status peace agreement is around the corner. I think it's going to be a long process, a complicated process. I have my own ideas about it, and I have a kind of new peace idea that I think is much more relevant and realistic. But leaving all that aside, if you do want peace, you have to fight evil. And you have to convince people who want a two-state solution but are afraid of it, of the consequences, are afraid of what has happened in Gaza, are afraid of the terror offensives we experience in the West Bank as well. You have to convince them that you are going to be very tough when it goes wrong. So for the sake of peace, we must have a demilitarized Gaza. For the sake of peace, we must weaken Hamas as much as possible. And for the sake of peace, we must help moderate Palestinians and moderate Arabs deal with Arab extremism, with fanaticism, and with this kind of vicious Arab and Palestinian organization. I think on this cause, we all can unite. And the reason I wrote this piece today for Haaretz is really that I think that there is actually something here we can all unite around. We can then have our political differences and ideological differences, but there's something fundamental here that we are all faced with, and let's deal with it together. Together as the Jewish state, as Israel, together as the Jewish people, and together as the international community that is committed to democracy, to progress, and to human rights. All of the above on this issue actually merge, and they all force us, compel us, to act in an assertive manner against Hamas, so we will have a future for Palestinians, for Arabs, for Jews, and for Israelis.
Ari, I love talking to you. I love listening to you. The problem is I have a million more questions. I really hope the next time you're in the United States, you'll sit with me. It's not just that you've written a book that has exploded on the American Jewish scene. You are raising issues, and you raise them in a fascinating way. I really want at one point to be able to sit at a table with you and ask you all the questions I have. In the meantime, thank you for going out of your way to make sure you shared some time with us, and I'm very grateful here on Shalom TV.
Thank you so much, and may God be with all of us.
Thank you very much. You be well.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.